The moment Jasmine walked into that room, the air changed. Cameras were already rolling, whispers were already spreading, and fans watching at home could feel it in their bones. Something explosive was about to happen. This wasn't just another sit down. This wasn't another half-truth wrapped in a pretty excuse. This was the night Jasmine decided she had nothing left to lose. No regrets, no fear, and absolutely no silence. For weeks, rumors had been swirling around her name. Screenshots with no context, leaked voice notes that raised more questions than answers. Accusations flying back and forth between Jasmine and Kirk like verbal grenades. Fans were divided, families were tense, and friendships were hanging by a thread. Everyone thought Jasmine would back down, apologize, or soften her words to keep the peace. Everyone thought wrong. As Kirk sat there, arms crossed, jaw tight, trying to project control, Jasmine stared straight ahead with a calm that felt almost dangerous. That kind of calm only comes when someone has already made up their mind. You could see it in her eyes. Tonight, she wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to expose the truth and stand on it. Emotions ran high even before the first word was spoken. The room was packed with people who had opinions, loyalties, and secrets of their own. Friends exchanged nervous glances. Family members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Fans watching live flooded the comments with questions, theories, and warnings. Don't do it, Jasmine. Tell your truth. Kirk looks guilty. The tension was unbearable. Then Jasmine finally spoke, and everything cracked wide open. What she revealed sent shockwaves through everyone present. Allegiances were questioned. Old wounds were ripped open. Stories that were once whispered behind closed doors were dragged straight into the spotlight. Kirk tried to interrupt, tried to control the narrative, but Jasmine wasn't having it. For the first time, she was done protecting everyone else at the expense of herself. Fans are shocked by how fearless she sounded. No tears, no shaking voice, just raw, unapologetic honesty. With every sentence, the room grew quieter, and the divide grew deeper. Some people nodded in support. Others looked away, unable to face what was coming out. By the time Jasmine finished her first bombshell, it was clear. This wasn't just about a relationship gone wrong. This was about betrayal, manipulation, and years of silence finally being broken. The family was left divided, friendships would never be the same, and Kirk was forced to face a version of the truth he never thought would see the light of day. And this was only the beginning. The room stayed frozen after Jasmine's first words, like nobody wanted to breathe too loud and be blamed for what came next. Kirk leaned back in his chair, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears, and said she was being dramatic again, that this was exactly what he meant when he told people she liked attention. That was the moment something shifted in Jasmine's face. Not anger, not sadness, but a quiet certainty that made even her closest friends uneasy. She told him she had spent years being called dramatic, emotional, difficult, and unstable, while he sat comfortably rewriting history. Tonight, she said, that story was over. She reminded everyone how it all started, back when things were supposed to be good. She talked about the promises Kirk made when the cameras weren't around, how he swore he had her back, how he told her they were a team against the world. She described late nights, whispered plans, and the way she trusted him with parts of herself she had never shared before. As she spoke, some people in the room nodded slowly, remembering pieces of that version of them. Others looked stunned, like they were hearing a completely different relationship than the one Kirk had been selling. Kirk interrupted her again, saying she was twisting things, that she always left out her part. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She simply said that was exactly why she was done staying quiet. She admitted she wasn't perfect, admitted she had reacted, yelled, and walked away at times, but she said reacting to disrespect was not the same as causing it. That line hit hard. Fans watching live flooded the comments with support, saying she finally said what so many people feel but can't explain. Then Jasmine dropped the first real bomb. She talked about a night that Kirk had publicly denied ever happened. A night when she called him crying, when she needed him, when he told her he was busy and couldn't deal with her emotions. She said she later found out he wasn't busy at all. He was out, laughing, telling a completely different story about her to people who already didn't like her. The room erupted. Kirk stood up, pacing, saying she was lying, but his voice cracked just enough for everyone to notice. Jasmine looked straight at him and said she had receipts. Messages, timestamps, witnesses. She said she kept them not because she wanted revenge, but because something inside her knew one day she would need to protect herself. That word, protect, hung in the air. Friends exchanged glances. Family members shifted. This was no longer entertainment. This was personal. She went on, explaining how Kirk would apologize in private and dismiss her in public, how he would call her sensitive one minute and then beg her not to leave the next. She described the emotional whiplash, the constant feeling of questioning her own reality. She said there were days she truly believed she was the problem, that maybe she was too much, until she started noticing how often his story changed depending on who was listening. Kirk snapped and accused her of trying to ruin his image. He said she knew what this would do to him, to his family, to his career. Jasmine responded calmly, saying she had thought about that for months, and what finally pushed her to speak was realizing how much staying silent was ruining her. She said she wasn't responsible for protecting a lie that was slowly destroying her mental health. Emotions ran high, and even people who came in firmly on Kirk's side started to look conflicted. One of Kirk's friends spoke up, trying to defend him, saying relationships are complicated and both sides hurt each other. Jasmine nodded and said that was true, but accountability was not the same as mutual blame. She asked why she was always expected to understand, forgive, and move on, while Kirk was never expected to change. That question landed heavy, especially among the women in the room. She then addressed the rumors that painted her as jealous and controlling. She admitted she had asked questions, had concerns, but she explained why. She said trust doesn't break out of nowhere, it breaks after patterns, after dismissals, after lies that are small enough to deny but big enough to feel. She said Kirk would tell her not to worry about certain people, then get defensive when she noticed inconsistencies. Kirk shook his head, muttering under his breath, but he didn't fully deny it. Jasmine's voice finally trembled when she talked about the toll it took on her family. She said watching her loved ones question her judgment hurt more than any argument with Kirk. She described sitting alone, wondering if everyone would be better off if she just stayed quiet and played her role. Fans are shocked as tears finally fell, not messy or loud, but heavy and honest. The family was left divided, with some members visibly emotional and others clearly uncomfortable. Kirk tried one last time to regain control, saying she was doing this for sympathy. Jasmine wiped her face and said sympathy was the last thing she wanted. She wanted peace. She wanted clarity. She wanted her truth on record so no one could twist it later. She said she was done being afraid of how she would be perceived. No regrets. No fear. The room went silent again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was stunned. Jasmine had peeled back layers that couldn't be put back together. Kirk sat down slowly, rubbing his face, realizing the narrative he thought he owned was slipping away, and as the cameras zoomed in, everyone watching could feel it. This was only part of the story, and whatever came next was going to change everything. Kirk stayed quiet longer than anyone expected, and that silence spoke louder than his earlier interruptions. Jasmine took a slow breath and kept going, as if she knew if she stopped now, the weight of everything might finally crush her. She said the hardest part wasn't even the arguments, it was the rewriting afterward. How Kirk would tell people she was unstable, that she imagined problems, that she was impossible to please. She said she would hear those stories later, filtered through friends and family, and slowly start doubting her own memories. She described moments when she tried to communicate calmly, choosing her words carefully so he wouldn't accuse her of attacking him. She said she learned to soften her voice, to smile through discomfort, to swallow questions that made him uncomfortable. Kirk scoffed and said she was acting like a victim now. Jasmine nodded and said that's what people say when they don't want to admit they benefited from someone else's silence. Someone from the production side asked if there was a specific moment when she realized things would never change. Jasmine paused, then talked about a conversation that happened off camera, a conversation Kirk swore would stay between them. She said she told him she felt like she was disappearing, like she no longer recognized herself. She said he hugged her, promised to do better, promised therapy, promised effort. A week later, he laughed about that conversation with his friends, calling it one of her episodes. The room reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, shaking heads. Kirk jumped up again, shouting that she was exaggerating, that he never used that word. Jasmine calmly repeated it back to him, word for word, even mimicking his tone. His face changed. Fans watching at home flooded the comments with one phrase over and over, "He's caught." Emotions ran high as Kirk realized denial wasn't working the way it used to. Jasmine then turned her attention to the people who supported Kirk publicly while privately messaging her with concern. She said she wasn't angry with them, but she wanted them to understand the damage of staying neutral when someone is hurting. She said silence doesn't always mean peace, sometimes it just means fear. A few people in the room looked down, unable to meet her eyes. She addressed the accusations that she stayed too long because of fame or attention. She laughed softly and said if attention was what she wanted, she would have told her story years ago. She explained how leaving felt impossible when every exit came with threats of being labeled crazy, bitter, or desperate. She said Kirk knew exactly which buttons to press, reminding her how the public already saw her. Kirk finally admitted he said things out of anger, but claimed Jasmine pushed him there. That's when she drew a clear line. She said anger explains behavior, it doesn't excuse it. She said everyone gets angry, but not everyone uses it to control the narrative and discredit the person they hurt. That line hit hard, and even Kirk's strongest defenders fell quiet. Jasmine talked about the night she finally decided to stop protecting him. She said she was scrolling through comments, reading strangers describe her as toxic, manipulative, and unstable, using words Kirk himself had fed into the storyline. She said she realized she was fighting ghosts, shadows of lies she didn't create but was expected to carry. That night, she said, she chose herself. She revealed that Kirk tried to get ahead of the story once he sensed she was pulling away. She said he called mutual friends, planting seeds, framing himself as the calm one dealing with chaos. She didn't confront him at the time. She watched. She listened. She let him show her exactly who he was when he thought she was no longer under his control. The room felt heavier as she spoke about the aftermath. Sleepless nights, anxiety, questioning every reaction she ever had. She admitted she considered apologizing just to make it stop, even if she didn't believe she was wrong. Fans are shocked by the honesty, by how openly she admitted her breaking points. The family was left divided as some members nodded with understanding while others looked conflicted, still clinging to the version of Kirk they knew. Kirk accused her of painting him as a monster. Jasmine responded that she never called him a monster. She said she called him human, flawed, and unwilling to take responsibility. She said she wasn't here to destroy him, she was here to stop destroying herself. That sentence landed like a final warning. As the tension peaked, someone asked Kirk directly if he ever lied about Jasmine to protect himself. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Jasmine watched him closely, her expression unreadable, as if she had already prepared herself for whatever answer came next. Kirk finally said everyone lies sometimes. Jasmine nodded slowly and said thank you. That was all she needed. The cameras zoomed in on her face as she leaned forward, voice steady again, and said if everyone lies sometimes, then everyone also gets a chance to tell the truth. She said this was her chance, and she wasn't wasting it. The room fell silent once more, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like the calm before another storm, and everyone watching knew the story was far from over. The silence didn't last long. It never does when too many secrets are sitting in the same room. Kirk finally spoke again, quieter this time, saying he felt ambushed, saying Jasmine chose the worst possible moment to air out private issues. Jasmine turned toward him slowly and said there was never a right moment to tell the truth when the truth makes people uncomfortable. She said every time she tried to speak before, she was told to wait, to calm down, to not ruin the vibe, until years had passed and her voice barely sounded like her own. One of the producers asked if she was saying Kirk intentionally manipulated situations. The word manipulated echoed, and Kirk scoffed, saying people love throwing around big words when they want to play victim. Jasmine responded by explaining how manipulation doesn't always look loud or obvious. Sometimes it looks like someone constantly telling you that your feelings are wrong, that your reactions are embarrassing, that you should be grateful they tolerate you. She said it slowly so everyone could follow, and with every sentence, more faces in the room changed. She described moments when Kirk would promise to show up for her publicly, only to disappear when it mattered most. Events where she stood alone smiling for cameras while he was backstage telling people she was difficult to work with. She said she found out later through messages and overheard conversations, and when she confronted him, he accused her of snooping instead of explaining himself. Kirk shook his head again, but this time he didn't interrupt. Something about the details made it harder to deny. Then came another twist. Jasmine revealed that the night Kirk claimed she overreacted and stormed out, she had actually received a call that shattered her emotionally. She said she begged him to come home, to just be there, and he told her he couldn't drop everything for her drama. She paused, took a breath, and said that was the moment she realized how alone she really was in the relationship. Emotions ran high as even some of Kirk's supporters looked down, avoiding eye contact. Kirk finally snapped back, saying she always painted herself as alone, even when people were trying to help her. He accused her of pushing people away and then blaming him. Jasmine nodded and said she did push people away, because she was constantly cleaning up messes she didn't create. She said she was exhausted from defending him to friends, to family, to fans, while he stayed silent or added fuel to the fire behind her back. Someone from the audience asked Kirk directly if he ever apologized for any of it. Kirk hesitated just long enough to be noticed, then said he apologized plenty of times, but Jasmine never let things go. Jasmine responded immediately, saying apologies without change are just another form of control. Fans are shocked as murmurs spread across the room, because that sentence hit close to home for many watching. Jasmine then addressed the accusations that she was doing this to stay relevant. She said relevance was the last thing on her mind when she spent nights crying alone, questioning her worth. She said if relevance was her goal, she would have stayed quiet and played the role everyone expected. Instead, she chose honesty, knowing it would cost her relationships, opportunities, and peace in the short term. The family was left divided as some members nodded in agreement while others whispered among themselves. Kirk stood up again, his voice louder now, saying she was rewriting history and dragging his name through the mud. Jasmine stood too, matching his energy for the first time, saying history was already written, she was just finally reading it out loud. The room erupted as producers stepped in, reminding them to stay seated. The tension was thick, and fans watching live couldn't look away. Jasmine looked around the room and said this wasn't just about her and Kirk. She said it was about how often women are told to be quieter, nicer, more understanding, while men are allowed to be flawed and forgiven. She said she watched people excuse his behavior because he was charming, because he knew how to apologize on cue, because he knew how to cry when it benefited him. Kirk laughed bitterly, accusing her of turning this into a gender issue to gain sympathy. She replied that if the shoe didn't fit, he wouldn't be so defensive. That line landed hard. A few people gasped. Kirk opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time, he looked unsure of what to say next. Jasmine then revealed that this wasn't the first time she tried to walk away. She said she had packed her things more than once, only for Kirk to beg her to stay, promising therapy, growth, change. She admitted she believed him every time, because she wanted the future they talked about. She said hope can be a dangerous thing when it's used to keep someone stuck. Kirk's expression softened for a brief second, and he said he loved her, that none of this was intentional. Jasmine responded quietly, saying love without respect is just possession. That sentence cut deeper than any raised voice. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt heavier, more final. As cameras zoomed in on both of them, fans are shocked by how exposed everything feels. Alliances are cracking, stories are colliding, and the truth is no longer something that can be brushed aside. Jasmine took a deep breath, sat back down, and said she wasn't finished. There were still things she needed to say, and Kirk knew it. Whatever control he thought he had left was slipping, and everyone watching could sense that the next part of this story was going to dig even deeper. Kirk stayed quiet longer than anyone expected, and that silence spoke louder than his earlier interruptions. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glossy, but his tone was sharp. He said Jasmine loved rewriting the past, that she conveniently forgot how many times he had tried to help her, support her, save her from herself. Jasmine didn't flinch. She said that was another pattern right there, turning her pain into his hero story. She reminded him that helping someone doesn't give you the right to hurt them later. One of the producers asked them to slow down, but the damage was already done. Jasmine continued, saying the hardest part wasn't the arguments, it was the gaslighting. She explained how Kirk would deny conversations that just happened, how he would swear he never said things she could repeat word for word. She said there were moments she started recording voice notes for herself, not to expose him, but to remind herself she wasn't crazy. Fans watching exploded, emotions ran high in the comments, with people sharing similar experiences and saying they felt seen. Kirk slammed his hand on the table and said that was a low blow, that she was painting him as some villain when all he ever did was try to keep things together. Jasmine shot back that keeping things together shouldn't require one person shrinking. She said every time she spoke up, she was labeled aggressive, unstable, or ungrateful. Every time he raised his voice or walked out, it was excused as stress or pressure. The double standard was impossible to ignore now. Then Jasmine revealed another truth that made the room gasp. She talked about a conversation with Kirk's family that he never told anyone about. She said she was asked, politely but firmly, to be quieter, more agreeable, less reactive, because Kirk had too much on the line. She said no one asked how she was holding up. No one asked what she needed. Kirk's mother looked down, clearly uncomfortable, while others whispered under their breath. The family was left divided in real time. Kirk denied it at first, but then admitted there may have been misunderstandings. Jasmine shook her head and said that was exactly the problem. Misunderstandings that always somehow landed on her shoulders. She said she tried to adjust, tried to be softer, calmer, easier to love, and in doing so, she lost herself. Her voice cracked as she said she didn't recognize the woman she became just to keep him comfortable. A close friend of Jasmine spoke up, saying she watched Jasmine fade over time. She said Jasmine used to be loud, joyful, confident, and slowly became guarded and anxious. Kirk scoffed, saying people love to blame him for everything. Jasmine responded quietly that impact matters more than intent. That line silenced him again. The conversation shifted when Jasmine addressed the betrayal that hurt her most. She said Kirk shared her private struggles with people who didn't care about her, turning her vulnerability into gossip. She described hearing her own fears repeated back to her as jokes, as proof that she was unstable. Fans are shocked as Kirk finally admitted he talked, but claimed he needed advice. Jasmine said advice doesn't require humiliation. Emotions ran high as Kirk's friends jumped in, some defending him, others questioning him. One friend asked why Kirk never shut down the rumors about Jasmine if he loved her. Kirk hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any answer. Jasmine nodded slowly, like she had expected it. She said silence can be louder than lies. She then explained why she stayed as long as she did. She said hope is dangerous. Hope that someone will finally hear you, finally change, finally choose you. She admitted she kept believing the version of Kirk from the beginning would come back. Saying that out loud seemed to drain her, but also free her. Kirk accused her of using this moment to escape accountability for her own mistakes. Jasmine agreed she had things to own. She admitted to moments of anger, words she wished she could take back, but she refused to accept a narrative where her reactions erased his actions. She said both things could be true, and refusing to acknowledge that was why they were here. The room felt heavier as Jasmine turned to the cameras and spoke directly to the audience. She said she knew people would judge her, doubt her, call her bitter. She said she was ready for that because living with the truth was easier than living with silence. Fans responded instantly, flooding social media with messages of support and disbelief at how raw the moment felt. Kirk finally looked defeated, saying he never thought it would come to this. Jasmine replied that neither did she, but here they were. She said this wasn't revenge, it was release. And as the cameras pulled back, everyone could feel it again. This story was far from over, and what was coming next would dig even deeper into wounds neither of them could ignore. And now that the truth is out, the question everyone is asking is simple but heavy: what happens next? Jasmine said her piece, stood firm, and refused to back down, but the fallout is only just beginning. Kirk is facing a storm of backlash, unanswered questions, and a reputation that may never look the same again. Friends are choosing sides, families are still divided, and fans are arguing non-stop about who they believe and what this all really means. Some say Jasmine went too far. Others say she didn't go far enough. One thing is clear, there is no going back to how things were before. Emotions are still raw, and the silence from certain people is louder than any statement. Will Kirk finally respond with accountability, or will he double down and deny everything? Will Jasmine find the peace she says she wants, or will this open the door to even more drama, more revelations, and more secrets coming to light? Viewers are already dissecting every word, every reaction, every pause, trying to predict the next move. Fans are shocked by how fast everything escalated, and many believe this story is far from over. Now it's your turn. You've heard Jasmine's truth. You've seen Kirk's reactions. You've felt the tension, the betrayal, and the heartbreak. Whose side are you on? Do you think Jasmine was right to expose everything, or should some things stay private? Do you believe Kirk will ever take responsibility, or is this the beginning of his downfall? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started. If you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when the next bombshell drops. Your support keeps these stories coming, and your opinions shape the discussion. Stay tuned, stay vocal, and remember, in stories like this, the truth always has more than one chapter.